Well, guys, I wanted to go ahead and kind of continue on the note that we left off of last week in the series, talking about the words of warning, because Jesus was explaining to his disciples that, hey, it's like, I'm getting ready to go. I'm going to be gone for a little while. It's going to be hard, super hard, 3 days. But at the end of that, I come back and you get me for a while, and then I'm gone on a more permanent basis anyway. A couple thousand years ish, somewhere in that ballpark, um, so far. And I just really tried last week to dwell on this idea of the disciples having to spend an unknown period of time without Jesus, where they felt totally disconnected from God, where they felt far away from Him. And I tried to bring it forward to where we tend to go through the same sort of things. We tend to think in terms of, okay, I'm not hearing from God today, so what gives? Have I done something wrong? Is there something going on that I don't know of? Is He speaking to me, but I'm just not hearing? And we go through these times, and sometimes it's just, maybe it's a few days, maybe it's a few weeks, maybe it's a few months, and for some people, it's even a few years. And I really tried to make it clear that regardless of what our feelings and our heart is trying to tell us, that God has abandoned us, that is not true. That God is with us every step of the way. Just like the song is saying, He is with us. He will never leave us. He will never forsake us. And that He will always be right by our side. And I say, even in the middle of our sin, even when we are doing something actively that we know that God disapproves of, where we're in a habit of sin, but we're just loving it so much, it's like, hey, I'm into this right now, and I'm not into you, God, right now. The furthest away He is arm's length away, which is as far as you can hold it. And that's it. He won't force Himself on you. He'll let you have your thing, whatever it is. But in the end, it burns us, and we start turning around going, okay, where's God now? I think honestly, if we're willing to be genuine and honest and fully transparent, I think all of us have been there, where we've had that sin that we were hanging on to, where it's like, yeah, I'd rather have this than God right now. But there's lots of times that it has nothing to do with our sin, and God just feels distant anyway. He's not. He's not even at arm's length at that point. He's right there. And He's got His arms around us, and He is helping us. And we depend on Him in those circumstances. Even though it feels like He's not there, He is. And so Jesus is here with His disciples, and He's trying to prep them for what would be the hardest time in our life. And I think, honestly, if we look at it, the times that we feel like God is not communicating with us, those are probably the hardest times in our lives. And that's when it takes a serious step of faith in order to continue to live as a Christian, and just continue to go through the things that we know we're supposed to be doing. Okay, God, I want to hear from You, so I'm breaking open the Bible today. I just want to hear from You. And we're going to Him in prayer. And maybe we're fasting. Maybe we're doing other things like giving up all kinds of sacrifice. We're getting out there. We're serving our neighbors. We're loving the people that are coming in contact. We're doing the things that we know we're supposed to do. And God's just saying, look, the last instructions I've given you still stand. All the stuff I told you in the Bible you need to be doing, all those promises I gave you, they're still true. Especially those ones where He says, I will never leave you or forsake you. The last directions He gave us, that's what we need to stick with. That's what we need to really abide in. It is whatever it is, the last thing He gave us to do, stick with it until He tells you otherwise. And that is super important. So I want to go ahead and kind of get into the text here. I want to back up just a little bit. of what we covered last week. Just kind of give it some context because it fits in really well. So let's get John chapter 16. We're starting at verse 22. All right. Oh, Elijah, you would. I got no, no, it's starting in verse 22. Yeah. All right, making sure. So you have sorrow now. I will see you again. And then you will rejoice, and no one can rob you of that joy. At that time, you won't need to ask me for anything. I tell you the truth. You will ask the Father directly, and he will grant your request because you use my name. You haven't done this before. Ask using my name, and you will receive, and you will have abundant joy. I've spoken of these matters in figures of speech, but soon I will stop speaking figuratively, and I will tell you plainly all about the Father. Then you will ask in my name. I'm not saying you'll ask the Father, that I will ask the Father on your behalf. For the Father himself loves you dearly because you love me and because I came from God. Yes, I came from the Father into the world, and now I will leave the world and return to the Father. Then the disciples said, at last you're speaking plainly, not figuratively. Now we understand that you know everything and that there's no need to question you. From this we believe that you came from God. And Jesus asked, you finally believe? But the time is coming. Indeed, it's here now, when you will be scattered, each one going on his own way, leaving me alone. Yet I'm not alone because the Father's with me. I have told you all this so that you may have peace in me. Here on the earth, you will have many trials and sorrows. Take heart, because I have overcome the world. And this is big stuff. Stuff that he's trying to prepare the disciples for is the stuff that the church has had to deal with for 2,000 years, and that we're going to have to keep dealing with for however long it takes for him to return again, whenever that may come. Hopefully sooner rather than later. It'd break my heart if he came in the middle of my sermon. So I can live with that kind of interruption. All right, but when he's going through here, he's talking about this idea that what he's going to do, what part of what the cross accomplished, big part of what the cross accomplished, is reconciliation. Because if you think back, Genesis chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, Adam and Eve, they're the only people on earth, right? And they're walking with God. Whatever questions they had, they could ask him directly. Hey, God, why did you make apples red and green and yellow and I don't know, whatever other colors they got in? Or, whatever color questions that they had. I don't know. I like to think they had some deeper questions on why God made things a certain color, but I don't know what was going on in their head. They lived in a perfect world, and they could literally come to God and ask. And then chapter 3 hit, and we fell, and they messed it up for all of us. We started inheriting this nature that just drags us towards sin. Sometimes kicking and screaming, but usually it's screaming from fun. And so that's the way it was always meant to be, us in relationship with God. And the fall broke that. But then Jesus is getting ready to fix that and to reestablish these relationships. If you stop and you think about it, the whole time in the Old Testament, there had to be a go-between, right? The Old Testament, there was a sacrificial system. So you had to bring your sacrifice to the priest, and the priest sacrificed it on your behalf. You couldn't even do it yourself, right? And so they had to do that. And that made it to where there was a measure of peace between us and God. It was a temporary measure. It was just trying to stave things off for a while. And that's all that the temple sacrifices ever accomplished. It was a temporary fix. It was a band-aid. That's really what it comes down to. It was simply a band-aid. But it was a band-aid that was prophetic in nature, because the whole time that we're bringing this unblemished sheep for the Day of Atonement, I mean, if you stop and you think about it, God didn't have to include those directions in the Bible. He could have said, okay, here's the manual for the Levites. Here you go. This is the priesthood. This is what you need to know. They didn't need all Israel's help to go find an unblemished lamb. They could have done that themselves. And they could have gone and done it, and Israel known none the better, wiser what was going on. Their knowledge was not necessary. It was helpful, because it was the whole time it was pointing forward to Jesus. The time when what we see is going on here and now in the text is this process of reconciliation, of restoring what we had in the garden. If you stop and you think about it, as wonderful as it was to be among his disciples, getting to walk around with him and ask him questions directly, it's like, hey, Jesus, when you said this parable, what did you mean by that? And having him explain it, I mean, that would be so awesome, so wonderful. But Jesus has told us early in this chapter that it's better for us that he go away and that the Holy Spirit come. And that feels counterintuitive, because we're physical creatures. We see, we like to touch things, we like to interact, we like to hear words. And I don't know about you guys, but I have yet to audibly hear the voice of God. Hasn't happened for me yet, anyway. I hope someday I get to hear that. That would be awesome. And it happens to some people. It just hasn't happened to me yet. But what Jesus is trying to do here, what he is doing, is he's reconnecting things. And he's saying, you don't have to. Yes, Jesus is the great high priest. He is also the sacrifice. He's the one offering himself on the cross. There's all that symbolism, but it's all to reconnect us so that we don't have to go through a high priest anymore. Yes, we ask for things in his name, but we have a direct connection to the Father. And we have the Holy Spirit living inside us. And suddenly we have a direct connection with all the triune God. Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Instead of having to go through Jesus. The disciples thought they had it made walking around and talking to Jesus. I mean, it doesn't get much better than that. They were believing that he's God in human form. He's the Messiah they've been waiting for. There's freedom coming, regardless of whether they got the idea of what that freedom really was or not. They understood that good things were coming. That he didn't come just to say hi and then split. He came for a reason, for a purpose. And so they're trusting in that purpose. But what they're not getting is that walking around and talking with Jesus, I won't say it's second rate, but it's less than having a connection to also the Father, not just the Son, but also the Father, and also the Holy Spirit inside us. We get it all. We don't get a part. We don't have to go through Jesus. As awesome as that is, it's even better to have that direct connection. So if you stop and think about it, what Jesus did is he reestablished the relationship between us and our Creator, our Father. There's a reason why, time and time again, he's called our Father. Jesus fixed that relationship. And now we have that connection. So just imagine it. Your dad owns a fancy restaurant, okay? You get to walk in anytime, and it doesn't matter what stars or VIPs are coming in and they have reservations. You get a table. You get the best table in the house. You have that kind of faith. Anytime, you have direct access. You can hop up away from the table and go and visit with Dad in the kitchen. Whatever it takes. That's what we have. And that's what Jesus is trying to tell these guys, is that, hey, it really is better if I go. And you no longer have to worry about asking me, okay, Jesus, hey, would you mind asking the Father if he would heal my mother-in-law, or whatever it is that they were asking for. Now they could go to the Father on their own. They didn't have to go through a high priest named Caiaphas or a high priest named Jesus. They didn't have to go through anyone. This is part of what, I hate to say it, but this is part of what Catholicism is kind of missed, is that they're like, hey, let's go through Mary, let's go through Saint whoever. And I'm not saying that those weren't good and godly people. And someone, one Catholic I met, explained it to me like this. It's kind of like, that person who just seems to have a direct connection to God, that when they ask for things from God, he's more, for whatever reason, he just seems to give them whatever they ask. So it's like, hey, I'm going to ask this person to pray for them. It's the same sort of thing. It's the way that person explained it. I'm like, well, that's fine. That's good. But did you know that you have the same connection to the same God as Saint Nicholas or Saint Christopher or Mary or whoever else? Exactly. You don't have to go through anyone for anything. Your faith is your own. Your connection with God is your own. You can't go. Matter of fact, these days, you can't go through anyone else. You can't go through your parents. That's typically in America, that's the way we try to tackle it, is that we're willing to ride in on our parents' faith. And for a while, that makes sense as a kid, because kind of like, hey, they taught us, we know what they've taught us, we kind of understand Christianity through their eyes. There comes a point in time, whether it's as a 7-year-old or as a 70-year-old, we have to come to that faith on our own. And we have to understand God as well as we can understand God on our own. We can't go through somebody. Jesus made it for we don't have to. So why would you even try? That's the question. Let's zoom in a little bit on this. It's at 25. It says, I've spoken of these matters in figures of speech. But soon I will stop speaking figuratively, and I will tell you plainly all about the Father. So he's trying to tell us that, all these parables, everything else he's been doing, yes, he's come back and he's explained it to them afterwards sometimes. Not all the time, but pretty often. He come back and he tells his disciples what he was talking about. And so all those figurative speeches are going away. We're getting ready to be in direct territory. And stop and you think about it. That's why so many people love the epistles. It's a lot more straightforward than Jesus' teachings. Yes, we all love the parable about the prodigal son and the other ones that he's told. We all probably have that paper parable that he told us. And we get something out of that, and it's so rich. But there's something also about going through the book of Ephesians or Romans or First Peter or whatever else, and he's just laying it out straight out. He's telling us this is what's going on, this is what you can expect, this is how you respond, this is what I expect of you. All these things, it's very straightforward from here on out. And I love that about him. That he's not beating around the bush anymore. So,
Say the epistles?
Yeah, the epistles. Those are the letters that were written in the New Testament. So like first and second, or let's start with Romans. Romans through all the way through the book of Jude. All those are letters that were written. Most of them by Paul, but by others as well. And they're just letters that were written to different churches for different purposes. But they still have a lot of meaning to us today. Those are, it's weird. I don't know where the word came from, but it's epistles basically means a letter. So, all right. Verse 26 says, then you will ask in my name. I'm not saying I will ask the Father on your behalf. It's right there. He's trying to tell you. You're going to ask for it in my name. I'm not going to the Father for you. You're just going to ask for it in my name. Verse 27 says, for the Father himself loves you dearly because you love me and believe that I came from God. So because we love Jesus, God whom we could see, and we believed him, suddenly we have access to the Father. and we have His blessings poured out on us. But
I'm sorry. What is the difference between epistle and apostle?
an epistle is a letter, it's a thing you can say. An apostle is a person.
Okay, gotcha. Now I understand what you said. Okay, thank you.
It's all good.
The epistles are the books of the Bible. The apostles are the authors.
Okay.
There you go. That's a good way.
Okay.
All right, let's move on. Let's see. Verse 28 says, yes, I came from the Father into the world, and now I leave the world and return to the Father. So he's trying to prepare them. Again, that, it's like, I've been here, I came from God, you guys have kind of got that, you've gotten a glimpse of the kingdom of God through me in my life, but I'm fixing to go away. And so things are going to change. Verse 29, then his disciples said, at last you are speaking plainly and not figuratively. Now we understand that you know everything and that there's no need to question you. From this we believe that you came from God. So his disciples are just responding, just laying it out very simply. It's like, hey, you're talking to us plainly. We understand that you are from the Father, you're from God, that you are God, and that you're fixing to... I'm still not 100% sure that they understood that the cross was about to happen, that Jesus was about to lay his life down. I'm not sure that all of them got it. I don't think Peter did. Maybe he's just kind of the loudest voice in the room, and the others kind of got it. I don't think they fully understand everything that was going to happen for sure. But they had to have some concept. Jesus had told them multiple times what was going to happen. He didn't mention, as far as I know, the word cross and all that, but they understood he was going to lay his life down. How was the question they should have been asking. So they shouldn't, but I don't think they fully understood. But that's just my theory. So at any rate, like when I'm reading this part, the disciples are saying, now we understand you know everything and that there's no need to question you. From this, we believe that you came from God. And I think Jesus comes around, I just hear him saying, it's kind of a rhetorical question. He just asks, do you finally believe? Do you? Really? He's like, I think you believe, but I'm not sure you fully get it. Maybe I'm reading that wrong. That's entirely possible. That's the way I read that. Is Jesus is, because he didn't stop and wait for them to answer, right? He just rolled right on in what he was saying. Because the only answer they would give is, of course we believe. We're here, aren't we? We've been following you for years, and you're telling us that things are about to get rough, but we're not walking out. We're still here. I think they're appreciative of the fact that the parables are out, and Jesus is just telling them very simple things like abide in me. That big one that I love to harp on. We see that, and Jesus turns around, he does ask, do you finally believe? But the time is coming, indeed, it's here now, when you will be scattered, each one going his own way, leaving me alone. Yet I am not alone, because the Father is with me. He's telling them, you guys are going to scatter like leaves in a hurricane. All the dedication, all the commitment that they think they have, it's not enough. It wasn't enough to make them stick by Jesus through it. And that was okay. And he didn't need them to come along. They were effectively just laying down their lives for nothing. And he had plans for them. Maybe that was part of it. Maybe that was kind of God's way of saying, okay, your time isn't ready yet, so you guys need to get out of the room, basically. I don't know. Maybe it was part of that. Maybe it was just the fact that they thought they believed, but didn't fully. Without understanding completely who it was that Jesus was and what was about to happen. You can kind of believe in this thing that's going to happen, but it's kind of like, I don't know really what's going to happen. It's like you see in the book of Revelation, you see some really hard and ugly times coming. And the question remains, Okay, who's going to stick with God through that?
That word scatter is of those who routed or terror-stricken, or driven by some other impulses, fly in any direction.
Yeah.
That's a hard term.
It is. What is that? It's from.
That's the Greek sorpizo. I'm not saying it right. Of those who routed or terror-stricken, or driven by some other impulses, to fly in every direction.
So it's kind of the same term you would use about an army that just literally melts away. Suddenly it's mass desertion. I remember seeing movies about Civil War where there was mass desertion. There was just people running away when it was obvious that the battle was lost. Lines fell apart. Seasoned soldiers suddenly stricken with terror, and they're gone. It's the same sort of thing. You know, they're getting ready to run away in terror. If you, and you probably run into something at this stage in your life that you know you're scared of. Maybe it's heights, maybe it's spiders, snakes. I don't know. Whatever it is for you, just imagine that and that terror that hits you at those moments. That's basically what it was. It was that level of fear. They just cut out. Every single one of them, except for one guy, was at the foot of the cross. And his mother. John the disciple and Mary. As far as we can see, that's who we know is at the foot of the cross while Jesus was dying. What? Oh, yeah. Yeah. As far as we can tell, James didn't believe until after resurrection. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. But we don't see any indicators that he did. But yeah, they're getting ready to split. You'll be scattered, each one going his own way, leading me on. Yet I am not alone, because the Father is with me. And I can't help but wonder, all the commentaries I read didn't address this question, which has been my frustration with commentaries for years now, is that they rarely answer the questions that I'm asking. But I remember that, and if you guys remember last week, I read something from Psalms. I read it in the Message paraphrase, so it was different. But Jesus, and I told you I would tell you what that psalm was, and I forgot to. But it was Psalm 42, or was it 22? But Jesus quotes it while he's on the cross. He says, in most translations will say, my God, why have you forsaken me?
24.
Psalm 24? Okay, thank you. So I had some of the right numbers, just the wrong order. But anyway, yeah, Psalm 24. And in quoting that, Jesus is evoking the whole psalm. And if you remember reading through that, I mean, it was just this feeling, this absolutely depressing theme that was going through, that God had abandoned him in it. And we don't see a resolution by the end. Usually, Psalms are great because, it starts off like, oh God, why is life so terrible? And then by the end of the psalm, he's like, oh God, I rejoice in you again. You have delivered me. You have been faithful. And he's just kind of like in this wave form that seems to be his life. It's why my personal theory is that David was bipolar. I think he had mood swings like that. Maybe not. Maybe he's just using poetry to try to convey a large chunk of time and all the emotions that go through months or whatever. I don't know. Sure, yeah, exactly. I mean, we don't have to be diagnosed with bipolar in order to go through those emotions over time. But it's good to know, most of the Psalms, that there is that resolution. But that Psalm in particular, it's not there. It's not there. But you see him saying, God, I believe that you will. God, I know that you're there, basically. You see these things, these statements of faith, but you don't hear about, oh, God came through for me. You don't get that in that psalm. And so I come to this right here, and I see him saying, the Father will be with me even after all you guys abandon me. The Father's going to be with me. And yet I see on the cross and saying, my God, why have you forsaken me? And what I've heard my whole life is that the Father did withdraw his presence from Jesus at that point. And I've always believed that. But now I'm reading this and I'm like, did he really? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe what Jesus is saying is like emotionally, that's where he is. That's what he's feeling, is that God the Father has forsaken him at that point. But Father, he's saying right here, the Father's with me still. So maybe the Father didn't leave him. Maybe he just felt abandoned.
Because of what he was going through at the particular moment.
And that makes me feel a whole lot better, because times that I go through where I feel like God's abandoned me, suddenly I can go, oh, well, Jesus understood. Jesus, God in human flesh, felt like God the Father had abandoned him. I'm like, huh, okay, maybe I'm not such a screw up. Maybe my emotions aren't telling me the truth.
So the word with is meta. We got to give the other good side of that is that's after, behind, or beside. So that's what God is all he's surrounding.
Yeah.
He's around us.
And that is just such a theological truth, is that, I mean, we see in Psalms and other places that the Lord goes before us. The Lord, you know, to use the concept that I know I heard explained in a book called Point Man by Steve Farrar, where basically the idea is that there's a soldier who's leading the way. He's on point and he's trying to find the best path. But guess who's the guy who usually takes the bullet hit?
Oops. Used to come Lurk.
Lurk?
Concentrate, patrol, go front.
Yeah.
Scouts.
Scouts. Yeah. And they're usually the people who got killed. It was the riskiest position. That and the rear guard.
That is done right.
Yeah. Yeah, I believe that.
Well, I expectancy of a Ford air controller was very, very short.
Not surprised. But it's comforting to know that as dangerous those positions of being the vanguard ahead or being the rear guard behind, either way, God is the one risking it all. We're nice and cozy in the middle, relatively speaking. It's not to say that it's safe, it's not to say that it's easy, but it's good to know that God is the one who's taking all that for us. That he's acting as a spiritual filter to make sure that we're not overwhelmed by anything that comes at us. That with his help, relying fully on him, we can make it through whatever comes. We don't have to be spiritually on casualty list. Yet I'm not alone because the Father is with me. I've told you all this so that you may have peace in me. If you guys can remember what it's like to be in the middle of those times, it feels like God is not with you. Peace is about the last emotion on the list of what you're feeling. Fear, uncertainty, all of that, all those negative things, that's what we typically feel. Peace, no, that's just not natural. And I'm here to say it's not natural. It is supernatural. That we see time and time again that peace is a gift from God. It's not just a feeling. Yes, sometimes our feelings experience that. But the peace that God gives is not a matter of feeling. It's a matter of knowing. It's a matter of faith. Well, you come back to that famous chapter on love in 1 Corinthians 13. It says it towards the end there. It says these three remain: faith, hope, love. Grace of Jesus love. Why? Because faith, at one point in time, everything we're taking on faith right now is going to be concrete. It's going to be real. It's going to be the reality of our situation. The things that we hope for, what we are going to receive when Christ comes back, and there's white throne judgment, and all the believers are ushered into the presence of God. That's going to be a past event at some point in time. We won't need to hope for those things anymore. We're going to be in the presence of God, unfiltered, unashamed. Hard to believe as that is. It's going to be an experience beyond anything we've had now. He's just trying to tell us that we can have that peace We can have that because of what we have faith in, because who we have faith in, not what, who we have faith in. God will never leave us nor forsake us, that he goes before us, that he follows us behind, that he is right here at our side, all at the same time. That God is who we have faith in. And it's his promises, it's the words that he's spoken to us that we are having hope in. And we know because he doesn't break his words that those promises are going to be kept. That hope will be fulfilled. It's like God has handed you a winning the lottery ticket. And he's just saying, you just got to watch and wait for when the money's yours. It's coming. Except it's not really that. It's we get to join in an inheritance. It's not anything random. It's very intentional. It's the gift of God. And that's the peace we get. Here on earth, you will have many trials and sorrows, but take heart, because I have overcome death. He has. Because of what he did on the cross, death has no power over us. We don't have to be scared. We don't have to worry about that. It's just, for us, it's a transition. That's it. And so really, funerals for Christians should absolutely be celebrations. Yes, we're going to miss the person for a while, but we know that this period of time isn't that long. I know, me, the older I get, the faster the years fly by, it feels like, anyway. And so, it's really not going to be that long. Especially not when you're talking about billions and trillions and quadrillions of millennia. I mean, it doesn't end. We get it all. We get it all forever. That is who our God is. And that's what he's promised us.